Hi, my name is Heather from Fork in the Loaf, and I just wanted to do a quick video. I don't know how quick it's going to be, but I have a half a cow coming probably next week, I think. And I still have a few things in my freezer that I need to make room for. I've got a couple of these loins that I bought on sale, so I want to take these. I'm going to take these up, I'm going to dice them up, kind of trim the fat, and then I'm going to can them in pint-sized jars. This is a good size for us. There's just me, my husband, and my mom here anymore, so it's kind of different. I'm not having to do such massive volume that I've had to do in the past, so it's kind of fun, a little bit different. I would use this pulled pork. We're not gonna add any barbecue sauce. I still have plenty of that. There's one in the Ball canning book that's really good that has a homemade barbecue sauce that you make. We're not gonna do that this time. I'm just going to do salt and pork. It leaves it a little bit more versatile if I wanna do a carnita, if I wanna do a pulled pork with barbecue sauce, or if I want to do, let's see, what else could I do? I could probably do like a pork salad like I would a chicken or a tuna salad. And my husband likes to take rice. We could add some soy sauce, sesame oil, green onion, stuff like that, heat it up and put it over rice, and he's got a pork Asian dish. He loves Asian food. That's probably his favorite food. So I'm going to show you how I prepare it, and then I'll just kind of talk you through the actual canning process. My canner's outside. It's about 40 degrees outside. It's a little bit chilly. I don't want to stand out there and video that, and I have showed you some of how I can in my previous videos. So I'm going to just show you how I prep the meat, which is super simple, super basic, and easy. It's the hardest part of canning in my opinion, but I love canning meat because it is easy, and then I have shelf stable meat that will sit on my shelf at least for a year. I'm gonna go ahead and point you down and show you my work area, show you what I'm doing, and let's get this started. I don't know if any of you guys use a number 10 can for a little trash. I recycle my like my veggie bags as a trash can liner, and then I use this to put all my trimmings that I'm not keeping in. So that's just how I do things. Just want to show you too. Under my board, I have my damp cheesecloth that helps keep my board from sliding all over the place. So the first thing I'm going to do is get these things out of the bag. My mother-in-law made each one of us there's a lot of, she's got I think 18 grandkids, maybe 20, somewhere around there, that she made each one of the grandkids an apron, and each one of her kids plus their spouses plus her and her husband, and just made them all by hand. She's amazing. And it is going to get bloody. Have a towel handy, or do this over the sink or in the pan, which would have been a smart thing for me to do. I'm going to cut it in half to make it easier to work with. I'm going to clean up this mess a little bit. So on this piece of pork, and this is pork loin that I got at Costco, and there's really not a ton of fat on pork loin in general, so I don't really mind not trimming it, but when I see that much fat, I don't want that in there as much as possible, so I'm going to go ahead and trim that out. And I just lift it up and do like that. I was just watching, I think it's the Three Rivers Homestead. I really like her and her channel. I like her, some of the ways she thinks about food and about saving some of her stuff. I like, I have a lot of YouTube channels that I really like to watch. She's one of them I enjoy. And she would keep this fat and use it for, she would keep this fat and she would maybe render it and get it to use it as a cooking fat later on, which I work full-time. I'm not a full-time stay-at-home mom. I would love more than anything to be that stay-at-home mom and just take care of my home and my homestead and all that stuff. I just don't have that. It's not in the cards for me right now. So I do what I can with what I have available, and I'm good with where I'm at. Roots and Refuge is another one of my favorites, and she talks about using your waiting room as your classroom. I don't have a big homestead. I'm what you would call an urban homesteader maybe. I do have my own chickens for my own eggs, and I grow garden. I have a garden in the front yard, a garden in the backyard, and then at my husband's grandparents' house, we have a very large garden that we do like mass quantities of corn, green beans, and potatoes. I think that's the 3 things that we usually do over there. But some of the stuff that I gotta go check every day, like cucumbers, tomatoes, all that stuff that you have to check on a more regular basis, I kind of like to have it in my own backyard, so to speak, so that I can get to them easier. Now mind you, I've cut fattier cuts of pork like shoulder and butt, but I am kind of, I don't like the taste of fat that's been canned and sat on the shelf for a while. It kind of gets a flavor that I don't really love. Not that it turns bad, I don't think, it's just not a flavor that I like. And so I like to cut as much meat off as possible, or I'm sorry, I like to trim as much fat as possible off. And then I don't have to worry about too much of the fat being in with the canned meat. I want my meat, to safely can meat, you need to have it 1 inch by 1 inch. And so I try to do about 1 inch squared. I just filleted it the long ways. One of the things that drives me crazy, I love to watch cooking shows, but it drives me crazy when you see people cut across this way and then they have to chop that little piece and then cut across this way and they chop it across that little piece. That drives me crazy. I try to be a little bit more efficient with how I cut things. So I am going the long ways here. Simple little things that drive everybody, everybody has their own, and it's none of my business. I get that, but it just kind of, one of my things. I used to have a hard time watching other people stir the pot too, like how they stir food or mix food. It can, so dumb. Yes, I can be a little bit of a control freak. Just a little bit. So I like to cut these in lengthwise first, because then I don't have to chop all these little itty bitty pieces. Now this one here, I'm just gonna cut it like that. Doesn't have to be exactly 1 inch, but I get it as close as possible. I'm not gonna sit there and take out a measuring stick and measure it. I don't have time for that. Okay, so then I'm gonna take probably the half that I just got done cutting, and I'm going to start cutting it this way. Just doesn't that seem just so much more efficient than trying to cut little itty bitty rounds? One of the guys I really like to follow, she does her sweet potatoes. Well, she'll cut it into coins first, and then she'll take the coins and she'll stack 2 of them and make it into dices. And it's like, girl, don't you know if you cut it the lengthwise first and then do it that way, it's way less work. And then I'm gonna plop all that into a bowl for now. I could fill up my jars right now, which would take up 1 less dish. Mind you, I don't like dishes, but there's enough meat here for me to cut that it's probably better for me to just stick it in the bowl. I don't have every single jar ready. I just have a case of jars ready. So I don't want to dirty up the area with my wet raw meat hands. So that is 1/2 of one of these pork loins. I have another 1.5 to go. So I'm gonna finish cutting this up, trimming it up, and getting it in this bowl. And I will be back with you as soon as I am ready to start filling jars. So I was just doing this and I recognized a little something in here. So when you are doing your meat. You notice I have a darker meat here and the whiter meat here. I don't know that they that they call white meat and dark meat on the pork. I do. There's also a connective tissue, and you can see it right here. Let's see, it's kind of, I don't know if you can see it on camera, but it's kind of got a pearlescent shininess to it. That's not fat. That is connective tissue. So I'm not super worried about that connective tissue being in here because all of that pressure canning will soften that. The connective tissue will get softened in the cooking process. The fat will go rancid. The connective tissue will not. So I'm not worried about the connective tissue. See, like this is a little bit of fat here. There's a little bit of fat on here, but it's mostly just that connector stuff. And I noticed I was taking gouges of meat out of here, and I'm like, this is just not worth it. It's not that big of a deal to have that connecting tissue in there. Right here, that stringy stuff, that, and it's really, really tough. I don't know if you can see that. Let me see if I can. That type of stuff right there. That is your connecting stuff. It's not going to be as tough in your can or your jar as it is trying to cut it off. This stuff right here is really hard to get off without taking some of the meat off, and it's okay. I'm just gonna let it stay there. This big old hunk of fat right here I will cut off. I will take off as much fat as I can without sacrificing a lot of the meat, but it's part of the process. You just kind of miss out on some of the meat sometimes, and you just do the best that you can. And I'm not gonna take out the dark meat because, you know, the vast majority of a loin is white meat. The dark meat is just kind of a, I don't know. It's like this part right here is all the tenderloin maybe. And so I just don't worry about that, the difference. I just cut it and can it and just make sure I don't have the fat, because really it's the fat that I really have a problem with because it gets gross. So now I'm at the point where I'm ready to fill my jars. I have clean lids. I have clean rings. I have brand new lids that I just washed in soapy water, hot soapy water, and I just put it in here. You don't have to boil your lids anymore. That is an old school way to do these. If you read the directions on your canning jar lids now, you don't have to boil them to soften that seal. They are soft enough as they are. So what I'm going to do here, this is just kosher salt, the last of the kosher salt that I have. So I'm just going to use this. I'm going to put a half a teaspoon in each jar. And actually I'm doing just under a half a teaspoon. I don't know if you can see that. It's just under a half a teaspoon. I'm not real particular about having a ton of salt in these. I like to salt more of my food as when I'm eating it versus when I'm cooking it. It is not a necessity for canning. It is a taste preference. You are pressure canning this at very high temps. 15 pounds of pressure is pretty hot. And it will, and at my altitude, I have to be at 15 pounds of pressure. I live in the Treasure Valley of Idaho, and I know we're above 2,000 feet. So I add about little less than a half a teaspoon of salt to each one of my jars. And now I'm going to stuff them with the meat, making sure that I'm taking out as many air bubbles as I can. What I'm doing is called the raw pack method. You can cook these a little bit. It makes them a little prettier. It makes them stay separate. The way I'm gonna do it is kind of clump them together. I'll show you how the chicken looks. So this is a jar of chicken that I just canned last weekend, I think, or last week sometime. Anyways, I didn't do a video on this. I don't remember if I have a video on this or not. I'll have to go check. If I do, I will link it below. If I don't, I'll wait till next time I can chicken and show you. But see how it's kind of a clump in there? It's not loose and free floating. I did not add water to this. I raw packed it and it created its own juices. I do believe some siphoned, so that one will be one of my first ones to get eaten, but it's still good. It does not all have to be underneath the liquid. This is really handy to use for a lot of things, but for this chicken, I think it's actually more of a headache than it's worth. So I will set that aside. And did I just say chicken? For the meat. meat in general, whether it's chicken or pork or whatever. And I'm going to put this in here and I'm gonna start packing it down. I don't want any bubbles in here. It's not really possible to get every single bubble out. I have tried and tried and tried and end up making more bubbles. So I'm just gonna make sure that they're packed in there really darn good. You know, it's not possible to get every single bubble out, but like, I'm gonna try to get as much of the air out as I can so there's not a lot of open spaces. You can see the salt in there. But there's a little hole of air right there, so I'll just pack that down and just try and get as much of that air out as possible. I have a stick that I like to use. It's just a chopstick, and I will push things around in here like this to try to get some of that air out. But I notice that I have a tendency to make more air bubbles, so I just do the best I can. I would rather have a jar a little under full than too full. So on here, this is a canning debubbler actually, but I have the 1 inch mark marked with a Sharpie, and I'm gonna make sure that I have 1 inch head space. Let's see if I can show you. 1 inch head space. And that way, hopefully I have less siphoning and less, no buckling. You just want to make sure that you're packed in there good. There's no big air bubbles. And then I'm going to set this aside and I'm going to finish packing all these, and then I'll show you what I do next. I don't pack, wipe, lid, put in my pot, pack, wipe, lid, put in my pot. I do one step at a time because I don't like having to wash my hands for every single process. So, or waste a pair of gloves for every single process. Roughly where this, I don't know if you can see the edge, that little lip that sticks out at the bottom there, that's about 1 inch. So if I fill my jars to about that spot, then I know that I'm at about 1 inch. And I really have gotten to the point where I just eyeball it. I'm not going to take that measuring thing to every single one of these and check to make sure. When I get to the end, if I have too much, not enough to put in a jar, but too much to put in one jar, if that makes any sense, to top off one jar, then I will, I'll show you. Okay, it looks like I have about 16 jars. In this little bowl, I have some white distilled vinegar, and I have a paper towel, clean paper towel. And I'm just gonna go through and I'm gonna wipe the tops and make sure that this is kind of where I do the check and make sure there's no chips, make sure there's no, that everything's gonna seal okay. And I move where I'm cleaning around a lot on the paper towel, so because it kind of gets a little bit of like meat on it and it gets a little slimy, for lack of a better word. You want to use that vinegar to help cut the grease. Being on the outside is not as big of a deal to me as the stuff being on the rims. My mom's making her lunch in the background, so you'll hear her noise. So all of my jars are salted. They're all packed with meat, and they've got a little bit of 1 inch head space at the top. That's it. Now I'm going to put my clean and washed flats on them. I'm really only going to just make sure this is finger tight. I don't tighten them down. A lot of your buckling, especially some of your cheaper lids, can happen from tightening too tight. You really just need it tight enough just to keep that lid on there. They will make their own juice, so I don't add more water to them. I think adding more water, I've never done it with more water. I've always just done it this way, and I like it like this. You can, doing it just plain like this really leaves it very versatile. There's tons of things you can do with this meat. Whereas like when I barbecue sauce it, when you do put it on, make sure it's on right. Use your hand to feel how things are. So this is the last of my pork. It is not enough to put in. I could try breaking it up, but I'm really close to that 1-inch mark and I don't want to push it. So I'm just going to put this in the fridge and then I'll throw it into a stir fry for dinner. I'm doing a sausage stuffed portobello's tonight, so maybe I'll leave this for lunch tomorrow, or I'll just fry it up and we can have it on the side or something. So I just for ease of getting it to and from my back deck, I am going to throw them in here and then I'm going to take them outside. And here's what I'm going to do. Just like with beans, meat has to be done for the same amount of time. A pint is 75 minutes, an hour and 15 minutes. A quart is an hour and a half. So it'd be 90, is that right? 90 minutes, 66, yeah, 90 minutes. So I'm going to put these into my pressure canner. I'm going to have it vent for about 10 minutes. I'm going to put my 15-pound pressure weight on it. And then I'm going to set my timer. Once it reaches pressure, I'll set my timer for 75 minutes. And when that gets done, I will turn off my my timer, and I'll turn off my Camp Chef, and I'll just let it sit outside for probably close to an hour or two. My particular pot, for some reason, my pressure canner, for some reason, when I take the weight off, it doesn't matter where that needle is. It doesn't matter if it's the next morning. It is sitting there with a little bit of pressure in it still. So I have to really carefully, slowly take out the pressure, or else I will end up siphoning big time. So I will probably come back and show you the finished product, but I don't really want to go through the whole canning process with you. I just wanted to show you the prepping process and show you it's not impossible. It's not scary. It's different, and it's harder than going to the grocery store. Well, I don't know. I don't know if it's harder to go to the grocery store and buy it pre-canned, or if it's harder to do the canning yourself. Because, I don't know, for me, having to go to the grocery store, I have to figure out what day I'm going, and then anyway, freezer space could be an issue for me. So I personally just like to know what's in my food, and I have a tendency to think the stuff that I can tastes better than sometimes I can get from the store. Sometimes they put different seasonings in there that I don't always care for. So it just kind of depends on what your preference is. My preference is to can it myself. I kind of enjoy the process. So I will come back when it's all finished. I'll show you what they look like, and I will I'll see you in a little bit. So it's actually been a little while, about a couple weeks since I did the pork. I totally forgot to show you the end of it. But I did, when I pull them out, I let them sit for about 24 hours with the rings on. And then once that 24 hours is over, I wash the jars because they can get really kind of gross on the outside. It gets like stuff siphons out and comes out, and it makes kind of a mess. So I write on the top pork 21 because that's what year I made it. If I knew I was going to be doing this again in 21, I would put the month and the year. But this pork will probably last us, I mean, I did 16 jars, and that is, as much as I use it, I don't use it one a week. So that would be, this is good. Really, it's already January of 2022, so any pork I make at this point is going to have a 22 on it. So I just kind of wanted to show you, this is my barbecue pork. It has like onion, tomatoey stuff. I don't even remember everything. I have to pull out the recipe. But on here, I have on here barbecue pork. And I made this in 2019, which means it needs to get eaten up. Or I think it's the last jar of the 19. Here is some chicken that I did and dated with a CHX 21. And this one says pork 21. And you can kind of tell the difference in coloring as well. What's pork and what's chicken. So thank you for joining me on this adventure of a fork in the loaf. I hope that this helps alleviate some of the fear of canning meat. I love having canned meat on my shelf. I did have one that did not seal, and I think there might have been a crack in the, and sometimes one of them just doesn't seal for some weird reason. So I put that in the fridge and we ate that right away. So, Anyway, I just kind of wanted to show you the difference between, I wanted to show you the difference between pork and chicken, and I really wanted to say thanks for coming along with me on this journey at A Fork in the Loaf. And if you like these kind of videos, hit like, hit the subscribe button, share it with your friends, and we'll see you next time.